Hi, this is Robert Bailey, and this is the latest iteration of my Unreal Editor level, currently called CTF-lanes as opposed to CTF-ruined, mostly because it looks more like a lane-based structure similar to a MOBA map than it does to a ruined castle, which was the original idea, and it just kind of morphed as it went along. So I'm going to do a bot game with a scaled down number of players so that it's a little bit less hectic and hopefully I die less often. And I'm just going to talk through, play a bit, and then swap over to the editor to show a little bit more detailed stuff. But I also want to show the bots in action. Pretty much the biggest mechanical difference is these stairways are wider, but they don't look too much wider because the entire platform itself got wider as well. This allows more space and action on the platform, as you can see the bots getting up to, but also makes it much easier to run up these stairs while still allowing this kind of almost secret type alcove there for the minigun to be able to mow down people as they run in. And it also means there's a little bit more action here, which means it's more able to it's easier for multiple players to go through this area, and it also makes a nice high risk, high reward funnel for attackers. Another change is that this alcove also got solidified, which means it's another bank that attackers can rely on putting their translocator here, um, and it's another placement for attackers to have a nice break. And by break, I mean not a very long one, but a nice way for them to rest a little bit. Not really most, all of these like loaded steps are intentional to allow for a little bit of extra cover, some interaction behind, so players can sneak around and then run up here. And then all of this material in here is wall jumpable, which means players can. I've actually never seen that death before. That was kind of cool. Which allows more mobility in the base and more consistency in that way. There's ammo on top of each of these walls that kind of lines up with the major weapon on that lane. So this middle lane, for example, the middle height lane has the flat cannon at the center, so there's flat cannon ammo on the base walls. So players, as they go through the main routes, can get resupplied and never feel like they're ammo starved, while still limiting the flow of ammo and allowing more fighting over those control points. Similarly, the top of the tunnel has link ammo right there, which allows players to, the medium path has link ammo, has the link gun, so if they jump across, they can get link ammo as they go over. Similarly, actually it'll be safer to go around this way. I play Unreal Tournament safe and strategically. No, so there's some bio ammo pickups here for players running out of the tunnels, can take cover under the middle path and get some ammo that way and keep putting up traps even if you're not a particularly good shot. And there's no similar ammo running up into the tunnel system, but there's also no weapon that runs up there. So instead of it's more reliant on armor and the natural cover of the hills, which are still easily slopable, so allow players to move on. And then there's health tanks. It's kind of a friendly spot, but also because there's a lot of open space, so it's to help counteract players getting shot at a bunch as they are running with the flag in between the zones, because of there's so many sight lines, and also to prevent players from feeling like they just got one shot for no reason. Because this side I want to make, and then the other big geographical thing before I jump into it is now visual difference between blue and red side. Blue uses a lot more blues and stone type tones. Red side uses more rocks and sandstone. Because I messed around with the lights in the previous GrayBox and it looked kind of awful, and I couldn't find a good way of getting those to work elegantly without like baking the shadows and all of that, and it loses a lot of like the reactive shadow system, which is kind of fun. Whereas the skylight that I put in allows for some more nuance. Lights up the entire level. It just looks more clean this way. He's shooting at me. That's mean. And so then I was like, well, how do I visually distinguish the levels? Because there's some lights inside the tunnels, but it's not the entire thing. So I stuck with this type of theme. So there's a transition to this pale stone in the center as a no man's land type zone, and then it transitions over to rock and each side has primarily a three-tone of rock system, three-tone color system. So this has the sandstones, the metal, the rusty metal, and I forgot the exact one. I want to say it's aged concrete is the last texture. I can't remember off the top of my head. Whereas the blue side uses more of those high-tech hexes, but both sides use those um, because, well, they're flying metal rocks, so of course they would be supported by technology. And then, but it uses more of like the another type of concrete, and then cobalt, rock, and steel. I believe are the textures I chose. And then there's still counterplay around this area. So the hills aren't as deep. That's because there's a little bit more space in front, because it's not a strictly symmetrical map, even though the majority of it is. And it also visually gives the red side more option, makes them more distinct. Now I have to walk all the way back over there. Jeez. It makes the red side a little bit more visually distinct without sacrificing a lot of that counterplay, because no one was fully using that background. When I was playtesting, no one really used that background because it's more fun to just jump in from the sides than it is to run around the back. So this was all the space players were needing, and they didn't notice when I like clamped it off so the mountains looked less drastic. So I'm just gonna teleport in here and then grab the flag. I used one nav mesh for all of the AI. So it's just one gigantic cube that spans the entire map, and then there's invisible walls. I really shouldn't be doing this with the flag, but demonstration. There are invisible walls up there to make it so players can't jump out of the map, but because of the way the terrain is, they'd have to be very dedicated to get up there, and then they'd be ignoring the flow of the map, so I didn't feel very bad for putting up those walls, because the translocator is just begging to pop out of every map it wants to be in. But so that's a way to stop players advancing through that way. And so that was kind of the management system, and I'm just forgetting to show off the lights in here. So I use spotlights to kind of have the blue light very obvious from a distance, but fade away into the center as it becomes no man's land. And then you run to the other side. While there is this blue color here, that's the color I used for pretty much everything that was hovering, to give it more of like kind of a high-tech on low formation feel, was the goal there. So it's like, oh, it's supported, but it's also kind of hovering, so it has this little technological aspect. That's just rude. I don't think I'm going to win this fight. But, yeah. But, beyond that, the ammo placement didn't really change, the armor pickups didn't really change, because you run out into the... Oh. So, let's talk about it here. So you run out into the field with lots of health, and then... oh, it's halftime, that's why. You run out in the field with lots of health, quickly lose it, and then be able to recover it. So there's more of a cat and mouse type gameplay around the fact that there's so much conflict in the center, because it just funnels everyone into this open no man's land to encourage more play and more interesting play. So here we are at halftime. But other than that, a lot of the geometry is pretty much the same as last time. Of course, I can't nail it, but like all of the movement and all of the pacing has stayed relatively consistent. Oh, I almost got that. The sniper rifle hasn't really moved. It just, with the bots, it becomes even more riskier, so it's a little harder to show it off, but it's powerful if you can get it. So that becomes a focus point, and the upside is if a good player gets up there and then dies, well, they now have the can't think of the word. The sniper rifle is now fallen, so there's more interactions with it, and other players can pick it up. But you have to be able to get it down and then have it out. That is the first time I've ever killed anyone with a sniper rifle, and that is why. But so like even these areas have the hologram, or not the hologram, but like the lift, as I've been calling it, to have that visual consistency despite the coloring. The red side just overall looks more, can't think of the word. It just looks more like rocky, more geographical, whereas the is really the best way I can think to describe it. whereas the blue side looks more steel, more concrete, more manufactured, despite being the 99% identical geometry, barring the back face here. So there is more room here, but as I said, like so few players interacted with it, and it allowed this wall to look even more imposing. So I kept that space because it wasn't enough to unbalance the map from the tests I've run, but it was enough to visually distinguish the elements of the map, which I thought were worth the trade-offs that the slight asymmetry presented. And the asymmetry was where both sides having this outlet came from, was because blue side initially had it, and it was so much easier for red to break in and fight there than it was for blue side to attack the red side. So both of those now have this gate having an alcove going out to allow more of that counterplay and more of those fun translocator jumps inside of enemy bases. And yeah, that's pretty much it from this perspective. I will probably die very soon, and then see how the rest of it goes. But this can play up comfortably to around 24 players. You could always run it higher, but I built it around having 12-person teams. So the weapon pickups are designed so that everyone can you can consistently get a weapon. And even if you can't get it at your base, you're encouraged to then take a one from an opponent's base. But the Enforcer has a very short spawn time, and the Shock Rifle has a modified spawn time to make it run faster and allow more people to pick it up. So, and each weapon placement, running after a weapon commits you to a lane initially, which means you're more likely to run there, which again encourages the fighting much quicker early on. And the health pickups also encourage fighting because it's less risky to run out. It does increase the time to kill, but I appreciated the long time to kills, especially in the CTF map. While playing it and from player perspectives, playing it, very few people, like one or two of the people I played this with, ever felt like they were killed cheaply when they were carrying the flag. Because I mean, you have the translocator, you can catch up real quickly. So that was the risk with designing the map and wanting to make sure that flag carriers had a chance and maneuverability, especially when you have to deal with teleporting enemies. So having the health supplies allowed them to get more out of the dodge movement and wall gunning system than they previously could. And also encourage more rocket jumping because the elements of rocket jumping on the center path and wall gunning and then rocket jumping up places and impact hammer jumping with the flag, the health allows players to do that type of maneuverability without being set back too long with map knowledge. Jumping around blindly with those type of damaging moves will kill you because, I mean, you jump somewhere into a bunch of enemies and have no health. But the prevalence of the health and knowledge of the map, knowing when to attack, that allows more of a skill ceiling while still being friendly to new players on this map. And then Bio Rifle always allows for just fun blobs to set up traps, so you don't even have to aim very well to be able to contribute to your team. And so the general premise of wanting a system where players of various skill levels can all feel like they can contribute while being relevant on the map and having interesting ability to do what they want on the map was the focus, and I feel like I've captured it. I'm still probably going to tweak it at some point in the future, but as of now, I'm happy with where the map is, and the next step would be coming up with custom assets and custom elements, and maybe tweaking some more, tweaking the geometry to fit that, maybe adding in more placement. And I cannot shoot today, but yeah, so I'm going to die, hopefully. The one time I want to die, they don't kill me. Wait, there's a rocket launcher here. There we go. And can I right click? No. Okay. So I'm now going to swap over to the editor to be able to show that from a bird's eye view and kind of a big scale view of the map. It has been shown off in my other gray boxes, but just to get a sense of how everything looks with the new texture, so I can point out some of the other ways I guide players with the coloring. So I'm gonna, hopefully this will work. Gonna do this. There we go. So this is the map with its disgusting nav mesh, because I have a lot of jumping options. So we're going to turn that off so you can see everything. And so here, these walls around the edge are the invisible walls and boundaries. They're decently high up just to make sure that even if someone was translocating the staircase their way up, they would have to do that very, very accurately and very precisely for a very long period of time to be able to get out of the map. Um, Other than that, so in the center and along the kind of no man's land, I have the green texture for a grass type texture to guide players out from the base into this central zone. The sniper rifle has a little bit of snow around it and is on its own brown pedestal, just to kind of make it more visually distinct on the ground without being distracting. So that green serves to help distinguish players where they are. It's like you're not in a dedicated bases zone, you're in this open area. So if you see green, it's not that you're in danger, but you should probably be running. Because you want to get to the more subdued, the more caved in places so that you have more cover. And I just went through the entire map. But so players will run out, run across the green, then they're in cover, the brown. And the reason I stuck with the green was just because it was very clear, it was very bright, and red seemed to like having a red base, a red ground texture, because it's like, oh, danger. It felt like everywhere you were going was part of red base, which wasn't the goal. So the green texture allows kind of a player neutral blue versus red feel. Um, the other like big color element is the fact that the center towers, the center path is all of that hex material. It does a glow on the bottom because it's hovering. Um, so it's like, oh, that's what's propelling it up. And that was because it seemed like that would be an element that the blue side would plop down. So with all the technology, they plopped a center train path in, and that's invaded the map. And so it hurts the aesthetics here because it's kind of like messing with those aesthetics, so it looks more striking. Anywhere on the map, you can look up, see that texture, and if you see a massive wall of it, you're on blue side. If you see a bit of it, then that means you're at that center space. Um, and then, as I said before, you move from the browns over to these like white clears in the center for some central cover at this block and the sniper tower, and then this armor upgrade, because if someone wants to go and mess around that much and get the armor belt, more power to them, but they're going to make themselves one hell of a target. So it was more of an encouragement to do some for players to do weird jumps from these placements and take that riskier thing to land with 200 armor. Because it's fun when you land with 200 armor. It's not so much fun when you miss. Um, and I would know a lot about that. But so you go from this brown to the clear and its power ups over to the blue side, and everything else is the brown tone to make it consistent. I put white on the mountains because want to make it a little bit snowy, and I always like that type of a setup with like the snow-capped mountains. So they're there, and they still have this kind of a soft boundary, but again, they have a wall going through them, so you can run up them, but you cannot reach the height of them. Like you can't be standing at the peak because that's usually when it cuts off with the invisible wall, and that way players can't run away. The skybox now has a whole light, so the whole level is fairly illuminated. The only other light sources, so that replaces the directional light in the center, which is casting a bunch of weird shadows. And so either I had two and they were conflicting and it hurt performance, or I had one that was nice and convenient and didn't break performance, but it had shadows everywhere. So the skylight helps fix that problem. And then the spotlights in here, they have a very long depth of field. Let me see if I can click. Yeah, so they have a huge wide focus, um, and then they taper off around this point, and that was to make it so you have a bright backdrop that funnels out into the no man's land, so you don't have this giant red ray shooting out, and the point lights just were not interacting well in this type of environment. They were casting weird shadows. So while red side is darker, so they have the strategic camouflage advantage, um, both sides have similar lighting, and the point light allows very clear movement because you go from like when you're running in, you want to go to the bright side. When you're running out, it gets dark and you want to run to the bright side. Um, was the point lights were casting strange shadows, and I wasn't happy with the interactions I was getting, especially showing out. So, because I was getting like bright blue tops when I wasn't wanting them, or bright red starts at the top, and it wasn't looking as good. So I decided to go with these spotlights instead. So there's a total of 3 lights in the level, which is a far cry from I think the 8 I had last level. And most of them would be visible at a time. Actually, no. No, they wouldn't all be visible at a time, but like there were 2 in each one of these caves, and then when you were looking out, there's another one. So that helped clean up the performance without sacrificing the gameplay, which is what I was wanting, especially with as much wall running as you can do, and as much of the translocator as you can shoot through with all of these gaps here. I wanted to make sure that players weren't dropping frames as much as I could. And then I use BSPs for all of the geometry because I'm not making custom assets right now for timing reasons. If I were to go back through, I would export them, make my own custom models, and put those back in, and also add some more nuance, some more details to them. But right now, this is all BSP because while there's a decent chunk of geometry, there's not an overflowing amount, which means the performance between these BSPs and just straight geometry models should be pretty negligible, because I used a lot of squares as opposed to making big nuances. The biggest things would be the stairs, but even then, I don't believe there would be enough of a performance difference between BSPs and standard assets. And then the spawns are placed in such a way so that there are 6 in the center, 2 on the side, and 2 on the side. Actually, there's more than 6. I can't count. But the spawns are placed to help space people out as well at higher player counts, to encourage more movement that way, and to encourage more play that way. So even if you always run one side, you probably at some point spawn on the other. And it's like, okay, I'll run this way too. And it makes it a little bit harder to spawn camp because players will be spawning at all of those locations. It does mean that there's more spawning, which means sometimes killing players is almost not what you want because they'll spawn behind you and with pretty clear sight lines. But it allows a faster, more competitive map. You never feel like you're out of the action long, even in UT, like even on UT's time frame. So like you're constantly in the action, you're able to see enemies almost instantly, and I wanted that quick pace while still allowing for faster movement and allowing for the the new UT style of movement and weapon capabilities. Um, so the only weapon that did not make it over was the Redeemer, because the Redeemer is terrifying and scares me, and also I couldn't think of a good place to put it, because the sniper rifle kind of took what the Redeemer spot would be, but the Redeemer seemed very overpowered with the placement of the bases because they're relatively small. There wouldn't be a lot of ways to get around from the Redeemer, or a lot of places to stand and use the Redeemer. So the sniper rifle kind of took that place, and I'm happy with how it turned out. But that is my level, and this will probably be the final update for some time. But it's been fun, and I really enjoyed learning it and messing around with the Unreal Tournament some more. And the editor was relatively kind to me, so I didn't get too beat around. But yeah, this is CTF-lanes, as it is now called, and it was real fun making it. So, bye.